Favorite time, picking up ingredients. Today we're going with an Autumn IPA. Listen to this description. A smooth, malty character trailed by aggressive late hop additions gives this fall brew a complex and refreshing taste. Sounds good to me. All right, we're about to get started here. First step is steeping the grains. We need to get these into a crushed grain bag, which is right here. And then we're gonna start steeping for 20 minutes at a temperature between 150 degrees and 165 degrees. Okay, we are up to about 155, 160 degrees. It's fluctuating a little bit, but that's okay. I'm gonna add these 3 bags of grain to my mesh grain bag and start steeping for 20 minutes. Okay, 3 bags of grain into a mesh grain bag. I just tie a loose knot at the top. Double check my temperature before dunking it in. We're at about 160. I'm gonna back it down a little bit on the heat. And you just dunk it in. All right, we have been steeping for 20 minutes now. I'm about to pull the grain bag out, let it drip dry. Don't squeeze or try and pressure any of the liquid out. It'll drain on its own. And then we are going to add our DME, dry sugar, LME, liquid sugar, and Maltodextrin, and keep it at a rolling boil. Okay, we are at a rolling boil. It is time to add sugar. Important to keep in mind when you're adding this. It will melt to the bottom because of the heat source being directly at the bottom, so you're going to want to stir while you add. Another thing to keep in mind while you're doing this, as you're adding this, it's going to bring your boil down lower in temperature, so it's going to quit boiling. That's okay, as long as you go into the initial part boiling, it'll pick back up to boiling afterwards when you turn the temperature up. Okay, now at this point, we're gonna get back up to boiling, but I wanted to show you something before this gets out of control. Do you see how frothy this is? What can happen is you'll want to get it back up to a rolling boil, but you don't want it to be an aggressive boil. If it's an aggressive boil, it can boil over and all that foam will rise all the way up to the top, over top of your pot. It's a huge mess. Be careful of that. Just keep an eye on it. All I'm doing right now is I'm dialing back on the heat, letting it cool down a little bit. It's still going to keep boiling. You just don't want an aggressive boil. That's all. Now that I've got it back to a controlled boil, it's not going to boil over. We're moving on to the next step, which is adding this 1 ounce of Columbus hops. Then the next step is just to keep an eye on it while it boils for 40 minutes. Pretty easy step. Check back in 40 minutes. Okay, next step, adding 1.5 ounces of the Lemondrop hops. Get you angled here. Right in. Boil for another 15 minutes. So these last 2 steps are basically the same thing. I wanted to sum it up in one clip. These are Centennial hops. I have 2 packets of these. We're going to add 1, boil for 5 minutes, add the second hops, stir it all up, terminate the boil, and then we're going to move forward with cooling it down and transferring into the carboy, because at that point we're done brewing and time to ferment. Okay, so we got it all cooled down, transferred into the carboy here. Time for it to sit for about 2 weeks, and then I will use a secondary fermenter, transfer it into that carboy, and move on to kegging. See you guys at that point. Lastly, my Autumn IPA is now fermented, and it's ready to be siphoned into the keg. From this point, you are going to clean and sanitize the keg. Okay, the keg is open. It has been cleaned out, sanitized. The table's been sanitized. All my tools have been sanitized. It is time to siphon from the fermenter into the keg. Okay, lastly, insert the top piece of the keg. Reapply the circular ring and force carbonate.